Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creative Capital's Coping with COVID, Financial Implications for Creatives. We hope that everyone joining to us tonight, wherever you may be, is feeling well, and that this webinar will lead you and contribute to your financial as well as your overall wellness. This workshop is a program of Creative Capital, which supports innovative and adventurous artists across the country through funding, counsel, and career development services. As part of our mission to support artists when needed most, we have created this series of free online workshops specifically designed to help artists deal with the effects of the outbreak. Our next two workshops are coming up on following Tuesdays, April 14th, which is time management during challenging times, and on April 21st, which is self-care and wellness for artists. We also have an extensive list of arts resources on our website, which is creative-capital.org, as well as a list of festivals, exhibitions, and artist events that have moved online. We'll keep adding to these, so please check back regularly and make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter and social media for the latest updates. I'm now very pleased to introduce you to Elaine Grogan Luttrull, who will lead the session for us. Elaine has served as a financial consultant and provided advice and valued perspective to Creative Capital awardee artists for many years. She is a CPA and the founder of Minerva Financial Arts. In addition to Elaine's work with Creative Capital, she's worked with artists around the country through the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, the Tamarack Foundation, the Joe Mitchell Foundation, and the Juilliard School, among others. Elaine is based in Columbus, Ohio, where she teaches at the Columbus College of Art and Design. Elaine will try to take and answer as many questions as possible during the hour we have together. So if you have any questions, we ask that you please type them into the YouTube chat. Welcome, Elaine. Thank you so much for being here. I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Krista. It is lovely to be here. Thank you for having me, and a huge thanks to Creative Capital for all of the support you provide during this and all of the other times as well. It's really wonderful being part of the Creative Capital family. There are really fantastic resources. And as Krista mentioned, my name is Elaine, for those of you who don't know me. I have the privilege of working with such an array of arts organizations across the country, including Creative Capital. And it's really wonderful to be able to be doing this kind of work in service of the creative industry. As you know, this is a strange time, and the guidance that's coming out from the federal government and the state unemployment agencies and others is changing on a fairly regular basis. So I do want to make sure we're clear that this is for educational purposes only. We're trying to provide the most up-to-date, relevant information to serve you, the creative community, but this information is changing and evolving quickly. So definitely know that it is changing, and that's okay, and we'll try to keep you as updated as possible. We do want to also acknowledge that you are all experts in your own experiences. That means some things I say might really resonate with you and you might really respond well to them. Other things might not feel like they're really a good match for you right now, and that's okay. We want to be super responsive to your questions. As Krista said, put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that so we can answer them on a regular basis as we're going through this, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we possibly can. So at a high level, what we're doing is basically talking about where we are right now and what that means for you financially. We will go over some key metrics of financial wellness, specifically in the context of our current situation. We'll go through some emergency benefits and grants and other support that is available for you. And perhaps most importantly, we'll just share this space and provide some support for each other through the questions you're asking to each other and through the information we're providing. I hope we will all continue to lift each other up and provide this support as we navigate this crisis together. As we think about our current situation and dealing with the coronavirus and the global pandemic, I couldn't help but notice that what has sort of emerged, at least from my perspective, as the ground rule of dealing with the pandemic is to wash your hands consistently, nonstop, well, all the time. It's also been abundantly clear that listening to experts and expert perspective is really, really important right now when it comes to the pandemic. And I think if we were to draw a corollary into dealing with the financial side of the pandemic, the equivalent rule to wash your hands is really do the math. And I wish it were more fun or more interesting than that. But much like washing your hands is a really good basic practice that we should all probably be doing, doing the math and paying attention to your personal financial situation right now and reassessing it on a regular basis is really, really important. You need to have a sense of kind of where you stand, both in terms of how much cash you have on hand, but also have a sense of where you're going, what your expenses might be, where there might be flexibility, and what potential resources or other financial support might be coming in. It's not super glamorous to do the math, but it's important to stay on top of this and keep mindful of your financial situation as we're going through this together. So the first thing I'd encourage you to do is just get a quick snapshot of where you stand right now today, April 7th. How much money do you have right now? What's the balance in your checking account, in your savings account, in other sort of cash accounts you might have? And what does your debt situation look like? What's the balance on your credit cards or any student loans you might have, or mortgage payments or car payments? Just get a quick snapshot of where you stand. This does not have to be pretty, right? And it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate to the penny. We're just going for a snapshot, and we'll use this to build and add in some additional information so that you can kind of have some tools to manage your financial situation as we go through this. After you have a snapshot, the next thing we want to do is think about your expenses. If this were a normal webinar on financial wellness, we would very slowly build up these different categories of things that you spend money on. And we'd spend a lot of time identifying the accurate amounts that could or should be in each of these categories. So we'll do something similar tonight, although through the lens of the global pandemic that's happening right now, with some awareness and sensitivity to what that means. So the bottom section of this sort of expense builder is the cost for you to exist as a human in the way you want to exist. Now, when I'm working with clients, often I'll ask them what that number is, and they'll jot something down, and then we'll spend a lot of time understanding if there are other expenses that come up maybe once a year or irregularly that maybe we've forgotten about. As we think about this number in the context of the coronavirus, I think it's important to understand what you can do, if anything, to curtail this number as much as possible. To the extent that you can suspend any unnecessary payments or modify any payments you are making on a regular basis, that's going to be really important because cash is probably very, very tight right now for many individuals. And many individuals, especially in the arts, do not have a whole lot of money in those checking accounts and savings accounts to get them through extended periods of time. So it's important that we are minimizing our expenses as much as possible. And many of you have been through this before. You've been through relatively lean periods when sales may not have been as good, or there may not have been as many gigs in the works, or when grant payments may have been delayed for one reason or another. And many of you may have weathered the 2008 financial crisis as well, and the Great Recession. So we've got some practice and some experience doing this. So I'd encourage you to draw upon those skills and think about really how can you prioritize the most expensive, the most important expenses, specifically food, medicine, other crucial expenses that there is no flexibility on. That's what you should really be prioritizing right now. For any other expenses, if you can pause them or suspend them, go ahead and do that. Or if there's an opportunity to ask for flexibility, go ahead and do that as well. Maybe that means approaching the landlord of your apartment building, or maybe of the space where you have your studio, and asking if you can pause your rent payments for a month or two. Some landlords are being very accommodating and very flexible when it comes to this. Others are being less so, but you have the power to initiate those conversations. And it's important that you go ahead and do that because you have the best sense of what you are willing and able to pay right now. And so if you initiate those conversations with your landlord, you can understand from their perspective where there might be some flexibility. I've heard anecdotally that a number of landlords are allowing tenants to extend their leases by, say, 2 months at the end of the term to make up the missed payments then. That's not a bad option. Other landlords are proposing that the missed payments be sort of divided over the rest of the lease term so that you might pay a smidge more in each month for the remaining lease term instead of trying to pay it all at once. That's really helpful as well. We also, in thinking about any debt payments you might be making, right? If you have debt payments on federal student loans, those have automatically been suspended. So go onto your payment portal and you should see that your payment due right now is 0. I'd go ahead and save a copy of that or like a screen grab of that sheet just to make sure you're documenting the fact that you didn't have anything due during this time. But if you don't have federal student loans, if you maybe have private student loans or other types of loans, maybe credit card payments or car loans or other mortgages or other loans through a bank or another lender, there is a lot of room for flexibility right now. So reaching out, asking if you can pause those payments or figure out a way to defer your payments so that you can prioritize the expenses like food and medicine where there is no flexibility, that's not a bad option right now. And again, document all of these conversations you are having because it's going to be important down the road that you have documentation in case there's any confusion about why you weren't making particular payments. The credit bureaus are being pretty flexible about individuals and companies not reporting delinquent payments right now, which I think is really wonderful. But again, down the road, as we come out of this, that's going to be something you're going to want to check in with and just make sure everything is still in line. As we think about the expenses to run your creative practice, we want to also minimize those expenses to the extent possible. And some of the tips apply just like they did for personal expenses. You want to ask for flexibility. You want to suspend anything that is not absolutely necessary right now. All of those things are okay. It's also okay to continue making work if you feel moved to do that and if that's kind of where you are right now. But if you're not there, that's okay too. It's okay to make work. It's okay to not make work. You get to kind of decide what it looks like to run your creative practice during this time. I see through the chat that there are a ton of questions coming through about unemployment. I love all of those questions. I will get to them in probably 2 or 3 more slides, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about calculating your lost income and how to apply for that unemployment. So definitely keep those questions coming because we will get to as many of them as we can. Now, normally we would talk about how much you were setting aside for taxes and for savings as well. If that is still part of your reality, go ahead and still do that. But for many individuals, it's not. The federal tax deadline has been extended through July. So that means if you have not yet filed your 2019 tax return, that's okay. The deadline has been extended through July 15th. So you do have some breathing room there. But I would encourage you to check with your state or city as well, because many states have not yet extended their deadlines. The AICPA is keeping a great list. It's a wonderful resource of all the states that have acted. So if you're not sure about whether or not your state has, definitely check out the website or visit the AICPA resource. Eventually, I imagine most states and cities will get there to align with the IRS, but not everyone has yet. Now, if you are also in a position where you still have a W-2 job and you are trying to maximize your cash flow, if you are regularly contributing to your savings or a retirement account through that W-2 job, you might want to look at changing those settings for right now. Go back, continue to save eventually when this all passes. But if there are additional funds that you can have access to, now is a really good time to make sure you have access to them. If that is not your reality, then we want to go back to just focus on minimizing the expenses as much as possible and finding those other opportunities to make more money. Because again, if we were doing this normally, we would aim to make enough money to contribute to your savings and to pay your taxes and to run your creative practice and your life in the way you want to run it. Because often the challenge creative individuals face is not that they're spending too much money. The challenge is often that they are not making enough to cover all of these very reasonable expenses, including adding to savings. So when things normalize, come back to this and let's take another look at these numbers together to ensure you are earning enough to contribute to those savings accounts and to replenish some of those emergency funds that are definitely going to be deleted right now. So to summarize, you want to focus on the essential cost to exist as a human and as an artist during this time, based on whatever that means to you. And there is no one right answer about what that means. So you get to decide, but know what this number is. And then we'll go back and we'll do the math and we'll figure out how to fund it. Remember, we had a snapshot of the cash that you had on hand. And now we want to compare that to what you need to spend in the foreseeable future. Maybe you're looking at the rest of April. Maybe you're looking at April and May. Maybe you want to look out even further than that. That's entirely up to you and what you're comfortable sort of analyzing right now. And that's okay, right? But keep these two numbers in mind. And now we'll start talking about some of the additional support that is available to fill in those middle columns. So what support is available? Unemployment is definitely one of those supports, but there's also some stimulus money coming through the IRS system, and there's separate small business support coming through the Small Business Administration. What's really nice about the CARES Act that was signed into law 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now, is that unemployment insurance and also this small business support has been extended to those who are self-employed or independent contractors, all of those 1099s you get at the end of the year that make you an independent contractor, freelancers, gig workers, all sorts of other individuals that make their living in the arts through a variety of different incomes are eligible for these benefits. So let's start with the stimulus money. The stimulus money, as I mentioned, is being administered through the tax system. It is $1,200 per person. And as long as your adjusted gross income from your tax return was less than $75,000, you'll get the full amount. If your adjusted gross income was more than that amount, up to $100,000 of adjusted gross income, you'll get less than $1,200. And after you made more than $100,000 in adjusted gross income, all of the stimulus is phased out, right? If you're not sure what your adjusted gross income is, don't worry, no one knows. That is the number on line 8B of your 2019 tax form, or it's line 7 of your 2018 tax form. The IRS is going to look at your 2019 tax form, if you have filed it already, to determine your eligibility, or they will also look at your 2018 tax form. So if you haven't filed 2019 yet, that's okay. The IRS will look at 2018 to determine your eligibility based on that adjusted gross income number. I will point out, if you are someone that has not filed a tax return for 2018 or 2019, I would suggest that you go ahead and do that. That's the guidance that's being shared on the IRS website as well. You need to be in their system for 2018 or 2019 to be automatically receiving this stimulus check. So if you're a little behind, go ahead and do that. Maybe spend some time prioritizing that tax return over the next week or so that you can be in the queue to get that stimulus money. You must have a Social Security number to claim this, and the IRS is dispersing this through direct deposit. So if you've gotten a refund, the IRS will use that same information. If you typically get your refund via check in the mail, that's how the IRS will send you your money. The Treasury Department has said in the next couple of weeks, they will be updating their system so that individuals can enter updated bank account information. That is not there yet, so go ahead and just be patient. I will note as well that we are seeing an increase in identity theft scams going on right now. The IRS will not call you and ask you for your bank account information or your Social Security number. So if you do receive that kind of call or solicitation via email or anything like that, it's probably a scam. So don't fall for it and go ahead and report it to the IRS as well. If you are someone that has not filed taxes for 2018 or 2019 because you only received Social Security, you're okay. You do not have to file your tax return. The IRS knows about you and you will get your stimulus check in the same way that your Social Security payment arrives, which is typically through direct deposit. There is an excellent question in the chat here that I want to address. Is it true or not that the stimulus payment is an advance on a 2021 refund? That's kind of true, and I apologize for hedging, but it's being treated as a tax credit on your 2020 taxes, right? And a credit is sort of like the earned income credit or any types of other credits. Maybe you had an educational credit at one point. A credit reduces the taxes you owe. And this is a special credit because they're calling it a refundable credit, meaning it can reduce the taxes you owe below zero so that you get money back. So it is not necessarily going to reduce your refund for 2020. It is going to be treated as a credit on your 2020 taxes when you file them next year, right? So I hope that's a little bit clarifying. It's a little bit weird. These are the hoops that we kind of have to go through. There's also a question in the chat about whether the stimulus money is only for American citizens or do permanent residents like green card holders get the benefits too? Currently, the way it is written right now is that you must have a social security number in order to receive this stimulus. So that generally means that a number of individuals are not eligible for it. You must have a social security number. A follow-up question was, if you get Social Security, are you eligible to get this? And the answer is yes. If you receive Social Security, you are eligible for this stimulus payment as long as your adjusted gross income is below those limits. There's another question in the chat. Someone has moved since they received their last tax refund. So where should they update their address? That's a great question. I would encourage you to sit tight for another week or so. When the Treasury Department updates their online portal, they will ask for any updated mailing information or account numbers, right? So I would go ahead and just slow play this a smidge. I know it's hard to be patient because we want to kind of deal with this right now and get our money as soon as possible. I completely feel you, but keep an eye on the IRS website because there will be an opportunity if anyone has moved or if their bank account information has changed since they filed their last tax return, then there will be an opportunity to provide updated information. And if you are someone that has moved, but your bank account information is still current, then it shouldn't affect you. You should go ahead and get the direct deposit just like you would your normal refund. The question in the chat as well, does the stimulus money apply to international students who work on campus? So this would be someone who does not have a social security number, so the stimulus money would not apply to them. And I do apologize. I know that's jarring to hear, and that just happens to be the way the law is written. If it is any comfort to you, I think there have been a lot of perhaps unintended consequences around how some of these programs have unfolded. And so when things are updated and tweaked, those adjustments are made in very real time, but it seems to be pretty clear that you must be a Social Security number holder in order to receive these stimulus payments. Okay, I see a few more questions about unemployment, but I think those are the questions about the stimulus money. So quick recap. $1,200 per person, $500 per child. The IRS is looking to your most recent tax return to identify how many people are in the household and also that adjusted gross income number to make sure the household is eligible to receive the stimulus money. They are looking at 2019 or 2018 tax returns. If you are someone who receives Social Security, you are eligible to receive the stimulus. If you receive Social Security and you do not have to file a tax return, you can just relax, you're good, you're in the system. If you are someone, however, who is not currently receiving Social Security and you haven't filed for 2018 or 2019, go ahead and file so that you can be in the system. Okay, the next bucket of support that's available is unemployment. And I'm going to lead this with an apology because if there has been one area of frustration among individual artists I have heard loud and clear over the past, especially 2 weeks, it's been this area of unemployment. When the CARES Act was enacted, The federal government extended unemployment benefits to individuals who were self-employed, freelancers, contractors, gig workers, all of those things. However, unemployment is administered at the state level. And as we know, our states, all the individuals there are working remotely, and the systems are not built to correctly assess the information from those who are self-employed and independent contractors to get the unemployment out to those individuals. Each state has unique rules and a unique process for applying. So my number one piece of advice is get to know your state's unemployment website really, really well. And again, I apologize because that's probably not how you want to be spending your time. But if you are going to be filing for unemployment, you need to know what the process is in your state. Most states are releasing frequently asked questions on a fairly regular basis, and some are addressing very clearly what they want self-employed individuals and contractors to do. So look for any tips or advice that is being shared on those state websites. And I'll share a couple of examples. The state of Texas is suggesting that individuals call with questions on certain days of the week based on the first letter of their last name. That's how they're managing the volume of inquiries they're getting right now. And Texas also has a pretty good flow chart that basically says, hey, if you're in the system, you do not need to do anything. You can just relax. We'll be in touch. If you are not in the system, right, then you need to go ahead and apply online. But every state is handling this a little bit differently. Other states, Maryland is one, has said, look, if you are self-employed, do not apply yet because we don't know what to do with this information yet. So just sit tight. Kentucky, on the other hand, has said, you know what? Go ahead and apply, get in the queue, you'll be fine. And our team will kind of figure out on the back end what the appropriate payment is based on the information you submit, right? So again, this varies so much on a state by state basis. And this has been a huge source of frustration for individual artists and performers and musicians and dancers and designers over the past couple of weeks, because we all got really good news that unemployment benefits were being extended to cover self-employed individuals. But that good news is almost paused a little bit while individual states kind of navigate this and figure it out. I will tell you though, individual states are figuring it out. I ended up getting a text message this afternoon from someone in Indiana who has been in the queue and applying for about 10 days and finally received approval today, which is just delightful, right? Talk about a weight off of that person's shoulders. Stick with it, pay attention to the frequently asked questions, right? And just kind of stay on top of it because it will be sorted out. It just might not be sorted out quite immediately. There's a question in the chat about whether or not this applies to individuals who have an LLC, but they are the only owner. Yes, it does. If you are an LLC and you are the only owner, you are treated like a sole proprietor for tax purposes, right? You are self-employed. These benefits do extend to you as well, which is really, really wonderful. You have probably seen this flowchart from the Dramatists Guild floating around. It is a wonderful breakdown of kind of who you are and what you're eligible for. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And then as you're going through this, it's also helpful to kind of get a sense of what normal unemployment looks like in your state. If you know what normal unemployment looks like, that can help you answer the questions to the best of your ability, assuming you are in a state where they are asking you to go ahead and apply, as opposed to living in a state where they're saying, hold on, you need to wait a second. And I'll give you an example. One state pays unemployment based on average weekly wages for the past year, and they pay just about 50% of what those average weekly wages are. So if you are someone who was getting a regular paycheck, it's pretty easy to know what your average weekly wages are, right? You look at your paycheck and divide it by 2 if you're paid every other week. But for an individual artist, that number is so much more complicated to calculate because you might have very high average weekly wages during a really busy period, but it might be really low during other periods, right? And do you look at the most recent year or the most recent month? It's kind of all over the place. My suggestion would be, in this particular state, for example, they look at about 50% of your average weekly wages, and they look at the previous year's earnings. So if you are an independent contractor or an artist in that state, maybe look at what your earnings were last year. You can look at this number from your Schedule C on your tax form. And we'd want to look at that top line number. So what we would call the gross earnings. So your total income, not income minus expenses, right? We're looking at that top gross amount that you earned, not the amount that you earned after all of your expenses, right? So that top line number, and maybe look at what it was for the year, and then you divide that by 52 because there are 52 weeks in the year. That is a close approximation of your average weekly earnings. Now, we know in the real world of arts, it's all over the place, but for purposes of sort of aligning your information with what your state is asking for, it's helpful to know what they normally look for and how you can answer those questions in your context to the best of your ability. Some states are asking for proof of income. So this could be something like your Schedule C or your tax form from the previous year. Other states are asking for copies of 1099s that you may have been issued. Again, you'll just need to check and see with what your state is asking you to submit along with your applications. There is additional unemployment assistance of $600 per week above and beyond what your state would normally pay, which is really good news. This is that pandemic unemployment assistance program, this extra little surge, right? That amount is available through July 31st. It is not ongoing until the end of time, but it's meant to provide a little bit of help. States have the ability to decide how to disseminate this additional money as well. So again, pay attention to what the requirements are in your state. Oh, someone asked if we could repeat the flow chart. Sure. The source here it's from the Dramatists Guild website, and I have seen it all over social media. And now is probably a good time for me to tell you that Creative Capital will be sharing a copy of these slides later. So you will definitely have them to refer to. So take a screen grab the website at the bottom if you need it, but know that you will also have access to it. And if you Google Dramatists Guild unemployment flowchart, I bet it'll pop up. Another question was, would one apply for unemployment based on where their LLC is registered or where they reside? So in a perfect world, those two places are the exact same state. If that is not your reality, maybe let's say you moved during 2019. The general advice I continue to hear is that you are probably going to be applying in the state where you currently live, right? As opposed to the state where you may have lived in 2019, or you may have previously lived or previously had your LLC registered. If you are someone who lives right on the border of two states, so maybe you live in one state, but some of your work is in the other state, it might be slightly more complicated for you. But I'm assuming the question is sort of around the idea that maybe you set up an LLC and then you moved a couple of years later. In a perfect world, maybe you would have re-registered the LLC in your new state, or gotten some sort of reciprocity so it could exist in your new state. But sometimes we don't always live in the perfect world. So my general recommendation would be apply in the state where you currently live. There's another question related to unemployment that I think is such a good one. The question is, what if I have continuing W-2 income from one part-time job, but I lost all of my 1099 income? In general, you are eligible to apply for unemployment based on the lost 1099 income, which is wonderful. I will caveat this though, and make sure we hear this part as well. Some states say that's not okay, right? So let's pretend if your W-2 job was substantially higher than your 1099, and let's say you were still earning, I'm making up these numbers, but what if you were still earning $40,000 or $50,000 from your W-2 job? That might be too much ongoing income to qualify for unemployment, even if your unemployment was from totally unrelated sources that have stopped. So this question does need to be answered at the state level. But in general, if you have lost income from 1099 sources or from W-2 sources, even if you have some ongoing income, you can probably still apply because the rules have been relaxed. But again, check with your state. My guess is there's probably some description of whether or not you have to be totally unemployed or just have some amount of lost income to go ahead and apply. I'll pause for a second, just in case there are additional unemployment questions coming through the chat. Unemployment has been definitely a source of a lot of questions I have been getting. The next biggest source of questions is related to this small business support, which is what we're going to talk about next. I'll keep an eye on the chat in case there are more questions. Definitely keep them coming. Let's talk small business support. Individuals are small businesses if they are pursuing something, including arts, with the intention of making money. If you are self-employed, have 1099 jobs, gigs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you count as a small business. Now, sometimes that's annoying, right? And it's annoying to kind of separate those things in our brains, even though I would generally tell you to. But in this case, it's a really good thing because small businesses are defined for purposes of these new programs as an entity, sole proprietor, LLC, any of the above, right, with 500 or fewer employees, which covers most of the individuals I work with. So that means you could be eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. We're calling it PPP, and that's what we're doing with it right now. This is an amount that comes from the Small Business Administration through your financial institution. So you would apply for this through your bank or your credit union. And this is meant to replace salaries. Excuse me. This replaces the salary or the income you have lost as a result of this crisis. The other good thing about this program is that any amount that you are spending to replace your lost income is a forgivable loan. That means you do not have to pay it back. I'll say that again, because that word has been causing some confusion in some of the other chats I've been doing. It is a forgivable loan, which means you do not have to pay it back, which is really, really wonderful. Now, again, you apply for this program using a fairly simple application. You can get a copy of this application from the SBA website. That's the Small Business Administration's website. It's a .gov website. And you see at the top, you indicate what type of business you are. And generally speaking, all the types of businesses that exist in the arts are covered here. Sole proprietor is there, LLC, independent contractor, eligible self-employed individuals. All of these things are covered, which is really good. Now, the downside of this program is that it is administered through your financial institution. So originally, when it came out, a whole lot of financial institutions said, well, wait a second, we don't know if we want to participate. Since then, some of the rules governing the financial institutions have been relaxed a little bit, so more have been willing to participate. So if you were on this right from the beginning and you reached out to, say, your credit union and they said, nope, we're not doing this, go back and see if they've changed their mind, because they might have. The other frustration that people are experiencing right now in a really substantial way is that many banks and financial institutions, credit unions, have depleted all of their resources already. So this is something that you'll want to be in touch with your bank about to see if they're participating and to go ahead and apply for this funding. I see quite a few questions in the chat about this, which are wonderful. So let's go through these kind of one at a time. Let's start with this one. Can you receive PPP if you receive unemployment? No. What a great question. One of the requirements for PPP is that you maintain the salary of anyone whose payroll you're replacing, including your own, right? So if you are applying for PPP, you are not eligible for unemployment, right? So many individuals are kind of doing the math to see, number one, which way is better for them, and number two, if PPP is an option before they think about unemployment. But some people are finding PPP is not an option, so unemployment is a really good next step for them. this person read that PPP is only forgivable if you give money to employees. And this person is self-employed. They don't have employees. And if you're the owner of the LLC, normally we don't call you an employee, right? You're the owner. But PPP has special rules written for it, which means you do count as an employee for purposes of PPP, even if you are a sole proprietor or a contractor, self-employed, any of those things, you count. As long as you're using these funds to replace your lost income, then it is a forgivable loan, right? Now, the amount you can apply for varies. Many individuals are applying for their lost income plus a smidge more to cover rent, utilities, maybe a mortgage payment on a studio space or something like that. All of that is okay, but 75% of the loan amount has to go to replacing your income, right? So again, just kind of do the math, talk with your financial institution. They will help you walk through this application to make sure that you are applying for it and it's eligible. To do more questions here. Okay, we got the employee one. Oh, great question. This question is about this application. Okay, this middle section where it says average monthly payroll times 2.5 plus EIDL net of advance, right? I apologize just on behalf of finance world because this is really, really confusing, right? Basically, this is meant to help you calculate the total amount of the loan you are requesting, right? So the loan you are requesting is essentially enough to cover your lost payroll or your lost income based on an average monthly amount is what this form is asking about, right? And then they're making sure you know that, okay, you know that 25% of this total amount can be used on other things like rent or utilities, but 75% of it has to be used on lost income in order for it to be forgivable. EIDL is this economic injury disaster loan. This is also administered through the SBA. Individuals can apply for this loan and it comes with a $10,000 emergency advance. And that amount is treated as a grant, which is beautiful because you do not have to pay it back. It is a grant. And in my experience, which is admittedly very anecdotal, it is coming relatively quickly. This is meant to be a relatively fast cash infusion of $10,000 to help. Again, your best bet here is to talk to your financial institution because they're going to be the ones that can help you walk through these calculations and make sure it's appropriate. You're applying for the right things and it's appropriate for you. There is a wonderful question here and I appreciate this one. So thank you for whoever put this in the chat. But if we step back, the question is, if we had to choose between unemployment and PPP, what factors should we think about as we're choosing? This is a fantastic question, right? Because there's so much going on here. So let's just step back. The first thing I would do is talk to your financial institution. If they're like, yeah, we're totally doing PPP, let's help you with your calculation, start there because odds are you'll get the money faster. And as long as it's replacing lost income, this is a forgivable loan and we really like those. So I'd probably start there. However, there's a chance that you will be denied, right? There's also a chance that the financial institution will have run out of money or will no longer be providing PPP loans at this moment. So unemployment might be a really good option for you. The other thing I would look at is what does the unemployment benefit look like in your state? In the example I gave earlier, the state was looking at average weekly earnings or 50% of average weekly earnings. So let's say you typically earn $2,000 a month, and we know it's not always a month, right? But let's say that works out to about $500 a week. If you lived in the state in my example, your unemployment benefit would be $250. And let's say that state is also providing that extra $600 per week through July 31st. $600 plus $250, which would be your normal unemployment benefit, is $850 a week. So for you, maybe that's a better option than the PPP option, which is giving you $2,000 a month. So those are the two things you need to kind of weigh. It's a matter of how generous your state benefits are when it comes to unemployment, and also how quickly you can access PPP money through your financial institution, which leads to a really nice follow-up question. This person applied for the SBA loan. They bank with Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo has said they aren't giving out any more loans because they have run out of money. We are hearing this anecdotally from a number of financial institutions. So I would say your first option is probably to go back to maybe someone, if you can connect with a human at your local Wells Fargo branch over the phone or via chat or something, that would probably be a really good starting point, because then they can say, yeah, no, we're totally done, move on. Or they can say, you know what, turns out you're part of this SBA bridge loan program, which is different than PPP. So yeah, you're still in the queue, right? Because there are a lot of different things going on and a lot of moving parts. So for this person, I would suggest going back to your financial institution and just seeing if you can touch base with someone there, knowing that they are overwhelmed and struggling just like everyone else is right now. So maybe lead with kindness and some empathy and get a read on the situation from them, because if they can sort of reject your filing or just say, nope, it's not going to happen, then that enables you to then very easily move on to prioritize unemployment. I mentioned the other program from the SBA. These are short-term bridge loans. These are up to $25,000 at 3.75%. Generally speaking, the interest is deferred for a period of time. I don't like this option quite as much. I like the forgivable loans and the emergency grants and the money that you can really access quickly without having to pay back. But this is an option, right? So if that makes sense for you and it's something you want to pursue, that's okay. These loans are running through the SBA. So if you live somewhere where you have an SBA office, which is most places or many places, or if you have access to an SBDC, a small business development center, those could be really good options for you as well. And as we're thinking about all of these different options, I think it's worth remembering that you are part of a community as a creator. You have a relationship with a bank, right? You have a relationship maybe with your neighborhood or civic association. You do business with these other companies, maybe PayPal, maybe QuickBooks. Any of these other groups that you do business with regularly are all part of your business community. So it's worthwhile tapping into that community right now, right? Reach out to your financial institution. Make sure they're not charging you any fees right now. See what sort of emergency loans or grants they are offering, if any. They might only be offering them through a PPP-like program, and that's okay. But they might have some flexibility in extending lines of credit to you or something. You are part of that community, so don't forget to lean on that community right now. The same is true of other companies you do business with. I know PayPal and Etsy and some other groups have released sort of emergency support. Investigate what those are and if they make sense for you. They might not. You might look at the terms and say, nope, that's not a good choice, or I don't want to work with this company, whatever, you get to decide. But know that you do have these institutional resources available to you. And when it comes to kind of your community or other groups that you are already part of, these groups can help with advocacy, with leaning on landlords to provide lots of flexibility, and with other sort of support and access to resources. So definitely lean into these groups, because you've done a lot of work to contribute to these communities. And it's worth remembering that we are all in this together. So draw on that community support where you can. In terms about institutional support specifically for the arts, there are some superstar groups that are providing emergency grants and education and ongoing support. Also, there are a number of city arts agencies and also community foundations who are providing support to individual artists. So check out the resources in your own area to see what they might be. State arts agencies are getting funding, additional funding through the National Endowment of the Arts. That has not been apportioned yet, to the best of my knowledge. It is coming, but of course that's going to be directed towards arts organizations. So if you have relationships with those arts organizations, or that is one of your part-time jobs, know that additional funding could be available there. I see a couple more questions about all of these different options that are available with unemployment and PPP and the emergency loan, economic injury assistance, all that good stuff. If you have your application kind of in the queue, just let it keep hanging out there, because let's pretend you do receive unemployment, but then you get notified that you received the PPP. You can refuse the unemployment, and that's okay, right? You can kind of manage this in real time. And then there's another question about, let's say you get unemployment and then randomly you sell a painting or you do a virtual music lesson or something like that. Generally speaking, the amount that you might earn probably would be okay, but it depends on your state, right? So if you live in a state where they say, if you get any income, you are lost of unemployment, right? That's probably not a great situation. So maybe ask if the sale can be deferred for 6 months or something like that, right? If you live in a state with a bit more flexibility, selling a painting or doing a gig or something would probably still be okay. But again, check with your state. Again, you are part of this community, and it is okay to lean on this community for support. I see one more question that has come through the chat about those PPP loans. So the question is talking more about the 75% of the money that you have to spend on comparable income, and then the 25% you can spend on other things. So let's say I'm going to apply for a $10,000 PPP loan. Of that $10,000, I have to spend $7,500 of it on replacing my average monthly income over, say, a 2-month period, right? So if I have earned about $7,500 during a 2-month period, that's great. That $7,500 is going to be my replacement of income, right? That remaining amount, that $2,500, I can spend on rent, utility payments, other kind of essential business expenses, and the entire amount will still be forgivable. But let's pretend I take out a $10,000 PPP loan, right? And I end up only spending $5,000 on replacing my salary. And then the other $5,000 I have spent on office rent or something like that. All of a sudden, I haven't met the requirements of PPP anymore because I've only spent $5,000 on replacing lost income. So in that case, my loan would not be forgivable anymore, right? It's not the end of the world. I just have to pay it back instead of not having to pay it back, right? So I hope that example kind of helps clarify a little bit. In order to be forgivable, this PPP loan has to be used 75% to replace lost income. And in my example, I used $10,000 because the math was easy, but you get to do the math about what your average monthly income is, and then use that to inform the amount of the PPP loan that you might want to apply for. So speaking of these communities you're still part of, is it okay for you to still be serving the community creatively? Of course, if that works for you. When I normally talk about the different ways of earning money, I use this portfolio career framework, which is based on a performing arts analogy where you have kind of your main thing, your starring role, and then you have other sources of income that might be related to your starring role, but not exactly the same thing. And then you might have other income that's not related to your starring role at all. And this framework for sort of organizing how you earn your money is one that you can draw upon right now. If you are still making work and engaging with your customers and clients and those you serve, more power to you. That is amazing. If you are feeling moved to maybe pivot, to use an entrepreneurial word, or adjust what you do to serve those you serve in a slightly different way, that's okay too. If you are someone who is not there, you are saying, I am not making work right now. I am struggling with motivation. I'm not sleeping. I'm barely staying afloat. I'm spending all my time on the phone on hold with unemployment, right? All of those things I have heard from artists over the past 2 weeks or so. It's okay not to be making work if that's your reality right now, right? Some people are really inspired to adjust and keep engaging. Others aren't. You get to decide what makes the most sense for you. So definitely check in with yourself, pay attention, and know that you can use this framework long-term to think about how you might want to organize the different ways of making money that make sense for you so that you can reach a point where you are earning enough to cover contributions to your savings and your taxes and all of those other expenses for you to exist as a human and as a creator. So we're going back to the ground rule of doing the math right now. Remember, we had our snapshot. Now we've added the column about the money you think you might get in the not too distant-ish future, right? Maybe that's some ongoing income. Maybe it's a stimulus payment. Maybe it is unemployment. Maybe it is emergency support. And maybe it is new income because you're thinking about different ways of serving those you serve. All of that is okay, right? That gets to contribute to funding all of the expenses that are absolutely essential to you right now. And doing the math to kind of understand what amounts might be coming in and what things you might have to be spending is really important, because that can help inform some of those applications you're doing and inform kind of how crucial it is from a timing perspective for your situation. And if that still isn't enough, which it might not be, if we're being totally and completely honest, then you can think about other access to funds you might have. I've saved this for the end because this is not where we start. We start with cutting expenses as much as possible, and we start with all of those other potential avenues for support, right? Because they all have better options than some of these other options do. But if you have access to a credit card or other debt, that's an option. If there is other work that you feel like you need to take on right now, that's possible as well. I was working with an animator who is between jobs, as many people are right now, who really felt like he needed to take up a job in a warehouse doing some stacking and shelving. He happened to know of a company that was hiring right now because they're considered an essential business, and he felt so much relief at taking that job. That was a really good choice for him to make. But that's not the right choice for everyone. You need to decide what makes the most sense for you, and you can do the math to help inform that choice. I will say it is possible that there will be additional federal support coming through, whether that is an additional stimulus payment or maybe expanded funding through this PPP program or any of these other programs. That is always possible. So just kind of stay tuned. But there might be other assets as well. I would never advise liquidating your retirement under normal circumstances, but if you're in a position where you absolutely need some funds very quickly, that's not a terrible choice to have to make, right? If you have the capability of making that. But do the math to make sure you are making these choices on purpose. That's going to be a really important part of kind of getting through this and then dealing with the long-term consequences afterwards. I'd encourage you to keep your focus on what you can control. There is going to be a whole lot you cannot control right now, but there are some things you can control. So try to keep your energy focused on those things and decide what makes sense for you when it comes to where you're putting that energy. And long term, when we come out of this, we'll keep having these conversations about earning additional income to make sure you are covering all of these different expenses and contributions to things that you might have. Because again, the solution is not necessarily to spend less money, especially on your art. The solution is to increase the amount you're earning to cover the very real cost to exist as a human. And then we'll come back to do this math together again. And we'll think about all the new numbers that make sense in this map, right? The money you think you might get from these various aspects of your portfolio career and other access to funds, and what it costs to make debt payments if you incurred additional debt during this time, and what it costs to replenish that savings account so it's available for you the next time an emergency or a crisis happens, right? Because we'll keep doing the math and we'll keep persevering in this all together. That's the content we have. We recapped a lot of really important things and a lot of very nuanced information. So I thank you for your amazing questions and your enthusiasm and your willingness to support each other during this time. And if I were to recap sort of the most important points, I want to make sure I'm leaving you with a sense of optimism. It is going to be okay. I don't say that to minimize how very serious this is and will continue to be for probably an extended period of time. but it is going to be okay. The arts have always survived. You know that better than most. So step back, do the math, get that 30,000-foot view of your financial situation and use that to help make informed decisions. And remember to take care of yourself and others, right? So if that means making work, make work. If that means not making work, don't make work. If that means checking in with your math maybe once a week instead of every day, that is okay. Make the decisions that are best for you and those you love right now. It has been such a pleasure spending this hour with you. Thank you so much to Creative Capital for having these fantastic conversations, and huge thanks to all of you for sticking with it.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That hour flew. I just want to add that I know these questions about the benefits and the loans and the PPP has been on the top of mind for artists all week. This way, in such a helpful way, was incredibly valuable. Thank you so much. I think Elaine did an amazing job of answering in real time as many questions as possible. We're sorry if we cannot get to every single one of them, but thank you also for your questions and for spending part of your evening with us. We hope you found it valuable. Thanks again, Elaine, for all of the service that you're providing to artists and creatives across the country, not only now, but always. And just so everybody listening knows, the recording will be posted on this YouTube channel, probably in about a day or so. And for everyone who signed up for the session via Eventbrite, we will be emailing the link to you as well. So I think we'll close it off. Thank you again. And we hope to see you at one of our other sessions soon.